up one more time for Bobby Saylor, Joseph Haley. Our next speaker is a titan of the AIC, Mr. Dave Buckman.
Thank you, guys. Very beautiful. I'd like to preface this talk with the acknowledgement that the term straight man is gender biased. There have been countless female comedians throughout the history of comedy, and many of them are brilliant in the straight role. So forgive me if I continue to use the terms he or man or guy when delving into the subject matter. It's not meant to discount the contributions to the genre by the likes of Tina Fey, Jane Curtin, Candice Bergen, Pamela Adlon, Mary Tyler Moore, Abby Jacobson, and even on this stage by Steph Cook, Ashley Franks, and Naomi Perryman. But rather, I'm using it as a shortcut for brevity. The straight guy is a quote. The straight guy is never given enough credit for framing a gag, for the architecture, for the support, for the drive. He does everything except the punchline. That is a quote about Bud Abbott by Mel Brooks. Definition, straight man. A member of a comedy act who plays a stooge or a foil, feeding lines to a partner who in turn replies with usually humorous quips. Despite the names often given to the roles, the straight man need not be humorless, and it is not always the comic who provides the act's humor. Sometimes it's the straight man who gets the laughs through his or her sarcastic reactions to the comic's antics. But for every Mork, we must have a Mindy. For every Balky, we must have a Larry. For every Farley, a Spade. History. The template for the modern double act began in the British music halls and the American vaudeville scene in the late 19th century. Here, the straight man was a necessity, as he would repeat the lines of the comic. This was done simply because the audience would be noisy, and repeating the joke gave the audience a fighting chance of hearing the joke, and the comedians a fighting chance of getting a good reaction. Soon, the dynamic develops that the straight man became a more integral part of the act, setting up jokes so that the comic could then deliver the punchline to. They're not seen too much these days, but there was a time in this country when comedy duos haunted the pop culture landscape, the same way in which pop culture self-awareness does today. Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, Burns and Allen, Martin and Lewis, Nichols and May, Burns and Schreiber, Brooks and Reiner, Rowan and Martin, the Smothers Brothers, Pryor and Wilder, Aykroyd and Belushi, Fay and Poehler. Like roving packs of boy bands, comedy duos would haunt movies, radio broadcasts, television, and award shows with stirring regularity, leaving their mark on pop consciousness forever. The dynamic was simple and easy to imitate. One fellow would be the buffoon, who constantly mishears orders, bumbles plans, and spews malapropisms. The straight man played the role of the straight-laced thinker, the clear-headed one, the stone-faced charged with acting as the foil for the comedy stylings of his hyperactive partner. The straight man rarely gets the funny lines, but has to have impeccable timing and delivery so that the clown can hit it out of the park. The clown is the punchline teller, but the straight man has the indispensable job of setting up the joke. It may not seem like it from an immediate examination, but that is a very vital skill to comedy. What's more, they keep the wildness grounded just a little bit. If there were two clowns, we've seen how bad that can get in some certain sitcoms and films. Dumb and Dumber being among the best of the exceptions, but even then it can get a little grating, even to lowest common denominator comedy fans like myself. According to improv legend Miles Stroth, my level 5 teacher at IO, the straight man is an aggressive position. That is, you are actively seeking out things that are wrong. If there's nothing wrong, you can add information to make it wrong. The best straight men are so good, they can sometimes get laughs just by delivering a straight line so well that the audience knows that it's coming. This is essentially the basis of Bob Newhart's telephone routines. He was playing the straight man to nothing, which is very hard to do. Before I delve into a list of different types of straight characters, I should caution that not on this list is the type the only sensible character or the only sane man. While straight men and only sane man can and often do overlap, it's pretty rare to have one of each in the same piece. But the straight man and the only sane man are not automatically the same character. So the only sane man can be exemplified by Jerry Seinfeld in Seinfeld, or Tina Fey as Liz Lemon in 30 Rock, or the best of the best, Jason Bateman in Arrested Development. Here now is a list of different types of straight man, and this list is inspired by the teachings of Miles Stroth and originally culled from Sean London, who was an improv blogger in Los Angeles. I'll give proper credit where credit is due. Number one, the clean straight, exemplified by Adam Scott in Party Down. The clean straight is your classic straight man. He knows what's wrong and calls attention to it. He is simply a wall that all absurdity bounces off of. He calls out everything. Nothing slips past him. Everything that's not right gets called out. Then more specifically you call out something, the more you get laughs. But most of the work of the clean straight is simply calling things out. It's worth noting that all straights are just a variation or amplification of the clean straight. Number two, the angry straight, exemplified by Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm. The angry straight doesn't like the absurd. He wants the absurd to stop what he's doing. And he gets more and more upset as the scene progresses. Anytime a character storms off in a Saturday Night Live sketch after their current character does their thing for 4 or 7 minutes, you're basically dealing with an angry straight. If you keep heightening him enough, he also becomes absurd. No one did this better than Dick Smothers of the Smothers Brothers. So I'd like to show you a quick clip of an angry straight in action, one of the best, Dick Smothers. Good. All right, number three, the everyday straight, Jack Benny in The Jack Benny Show. The everyday straight is a straight man who encounters the absurd, but they have no relationship. This is like when you're playing a character in an improv scene at a bus stop, and then a weirdo sits down next to you, and then the everyday straight tries to avoid confrontation at first, but most of the responses are, "Excuse me?" or "Is this a joke?" or "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" or "I have to go." So usually you're playing against a complete stranger. Number four, straight as host, Seth Meyers on Weekend Update, or Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall. The straight as a host is played as yourself, or very close to your actual persona. This type requires a lot of confidence and charisma, and usually requires you to be very funny and very sharp. Number five, the absurd straight, Cheech and Chong, where each character tries to out-absurd the other, which in turn makes the other the straight man in a fluid exchange of roles. This type of straight comedy comes in handy when there is no straight man. So for the scene to work, you need to say the things that a straight man would say, but without ruining the integrity of the absurdity. So let's show that clip of a classic, one of the best Cheech and Chong scenes there are. That's good. In the Cheech and Chong movies, they use this type of comedy to very popular effect, representing the fluid movement of the status and the blurring of the lines of authority that exemplified the political turbulence of the 1970s. Number six, straight as victim. Chris Parnell in most of his Saturday Night Live sketches. Whenever the straight man is about to be hurt in some way, they can play straight as victim and say things that make it worse for him, completely oblivious to the oncoming danger. For example, if someone starts an improv date scene with you and says solemnly, "Honey, I have something really important to tell you," you can recognize to yourself, "Oh, this person is about to break up with me, and let me make it worse for them." Then respond in character with, "And I have important news for you too, I bought us a puppy." Basically, anytime your scene partner wants to do anything negative to you, one option is to play straight as victim. It'll be funny to make it worse for you, and the game is built in. Let's show that Chris Parnell clip. All right, so yeah. He doesn't get the job. So I love that example because Chris Parnell enters that heightening the reality of such a workplace and maintaining the ridiculousness of if you had worked in an office that might be something that you would do in order to finally stand up to your boss, so that Will Ferrell's character can go even bigger than we would all ever eventually expect. So two last examples I want to give you about the two, I think, the best straight men in the business. Bud Abbott and Margaret Dumont. In the classic routine, Bud Abbott had to say who's on first with just the right degree of earnestness and irritation so that Lou Costello could get his big laughs. And while Lou Costello, the funny, fat, nervous street guy, was always the recipient of the laughs and would get just about every single punchline in Abbott and Costello's history, Bud Abbott was the quietly suffering straight man who would toss out the setups with the best of them. If comedy's about timing, nobody had better timing than Bud Abbott. Bud Abbott was able to uncannily get into a rapid-fire argument with Lou Costello, say goofy things, keep the energy high, and still seem grounded in control and sane. He was the rock. If the comedy of Lou Costello may have been funny on its own, but Bud Abbott was an all-important anchor. He was an example that all straight men should look to. But when you think of the Marx Brothers, the words restraint and balance rarely come up. What we think of is the chaotic jazz-like riffing on reality done by out-of-control, childlike hell babies. We think how much glee they took in tearing down even the simplest of conversational niceties. We think of the wry slapstick skewering of the upper class. We think of the jokes of Groucho, the mime of Harpo, and the conniving of Chico. But where would all these conventions and upper class snootiness come from? The answer was Margaret Dumont, who played the stiff society dame in 7 of the Marx Brothers feature films. Like the brothers, her name and station would always change, would change from film to film, but she was also always essentially playing the same role. In her case, a rich, blue-blooded, obsessed with class, manners and status, and yet irresistibly and romantically attracted to Groucho. She was the soundboard for the brothers and offered all the best setups. You can't marry both of us, that's bigamy. To which Groucho would say, that is bigamy too. What Dumont offered was not deep character. She rarely stretched beyond the fur-wearing rich lady and rarely gave her characters any sort of depth or backstory, but instead a playful playmate, someone who's willing time and time again to riff with these guys. In terms of staying straight in the face of comedic chaos, the substantial Margaret Dumont was an anchor better than the rest. She is my absolute number one. So let's show that very quick clip and we'll wrap up. That's good. All right. Her facial expressions, her timing, her ability just to kind of keep never getting frustrated, always going right back into the well to keep setting him up. And just to conclude, the importance of the straight man in improv and comedy is to ground the scene to some recognizable reality. The better they do this, the better the absurd can go absolutely nuts. Thank you very much.